The sound of the gavel striking the judge's desk echoed through the cold, intimidating courtroom, each strike like a dagger to my heart. I stood there frozen, my hands trembling, as the words I never thought I'd hear sliced through the air. Custody is awarded to the petitioner. It felt as though the world had tilted beneath my feet. My knees weakened, and I had to grip the edge of the defendant's table to keep myself standing. The petitioner, Daniel, sat smugly across the room, his sharp suit and calm demeanor masking the lies and manipulation that had just ripped my child from me. Lily, my 5-year-old daughter, sat between two social workers in the gallery, her wide, tearful eyes locked on me. "Mommy?" she whimpered, her small voice barely audible in the silence that followed the ruling. I wanted to scream, to rush to her, to take her in my arms and tell her that everything would be okay. But I couldn't. I wasn't allowed. A court officer was already making his way toward her, gesturing for the social workers to escort her out of the room. "Your Honor," I pleaded, stepping forward. My lawyer tugged gently at my sleeve, but I shook her off. "Please, you don't understand. This is a mistake." Judge Cartwright, a stern man with piercing eyes and a graying beard, sighed as though tired of hearing my voice. "Ms. Harper, the court has made its decision based on the evidence presented. This is not the time for further arguments." "But he lied," I cried, my voice cracking. "He's not the man he claims to be. You're putting my daughter in danger." The judge raised a hand to silence me. "If you have any new evidence, you may file an appeal. Until then, this court's decision stands. Lily Harper will remain in the temporary custody of Mr. Daniel Richards." Temporary custody. The words felt hollow and meaningless. There was nothing temporary about the way Daniel had fought to take Lily from me. He'd used every tool at his disposal, lies, manipulation, his expensive lawyers, to paint me as an unfit mother. He dredged up my past mistakes, exaggerated my flaws, and twisted every truth until it barely resembled reality. As the court officer gently guided Lily out of the room, her small hand reached out toward me. "Mommy!" she cried, her voice breaking into sobs. I rushed toward her, only to be intercepted by another officer who held me back. "You'll have to leave now, ma'am," he said firmly but not unkindly. "No, please let me." My words were cut off as the door closed behind her, and she was gone. I slumped into a chair, numb with grief. My lawyer, Julia, placed a hand on my shoulder. "I'm sorry, Claire," she said softly. "We'll appeal this. We'll fight back." Her words felt empty. I'd heard them before. For months, I'd fought tirelessly to prove that I was a good mother, that Lily belonged with me. And yet, somehow, Daniel had managed to convince the court otherwise. The car ride home was a blur. The house felt unbearably quiet without Lily's laughter filling the rooms. Her toys were still scattered on the living room floor, her favorite pink blanket draped over the couch. I picked it up, clutching it to my chest as tears streamed down my face. How had it come to this? I thought back to the day Daniel had re-entered our lives, uninvited and unwelcome. We hadn't spoken since Lily was a baby, and he'd shown no interest in being a father until now. His sudden interest in custody had blindsided me. At first, I thought it was about money or control, but now I wasn't so sure. There was something else driving him, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. I knew I had to figure it out. The court might have believed his lies, but I couldn't let them define the future for me and Lily. I would find the truth, whatever it was, and I would bring her home. I didn't know how yet. All I knew was that I wouldn't stop fighting until my daughter was back where she belonged. The next morning, I woke up to the eerie silence of an empty house. Felt unnatural, wrong. For 5 years, Lily's giggles and chatter had been the soundtrack to my mornings, her tiny feet pattering down the hallway as she begged for pancakes or snuggles. Now, all I had was the sound of my own shallow breaths and the crushing weight of loneliness. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at a picture of us from her last birthday. She had chocolate smeared across her cheeks and that gap-toothed smile I loved so much. My heart clenched at the thought of her being with Daniel. She hated being away from me, and Daniel, he didn't even know her favorite bedtime story, let alone how she liked her pancakes. My phone buzzed on the table, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Julia, my lawyer. "Claire," she began, her voice calm but urgent. "I know you're feeling defeated right now, but I need you to listen. We still have a chance to overturn this. I rubbed my temple, exhaustion sinking into my bones. How? The judge believed everything he said. He made me look like a monster, Julia. I've been reviewing the case, she continued, and there are some inconsistencies in Daniel's testimony. They might seem small, but if we dig deeper, we could find something that turns this whole thing around. What kind of inconsistencies? I asked, a flicker of hope igniting in my chest. For starters, she said, Daniel claimed he's been actively involved in Lily's life since birth, but we know that's a lie. You've raised her alone since day one. If we can prove he's been absent all these years, it could weaken his case. We also need to look into his finances. He's clearly got money to throw around, but where is it coming from? I nodded, a plan slowly forming in my mind. What do you need me to do? I'll handle most of it, Julia said. But I need you to think back on every interaction you've had with Daniel. Anything that seemed off or suspicious. And if there's anyone who can testify to your relationship with him or his absence from Lily's life, let me know. After the call ended, I grabbed my laptop and began digging. If Daniel wanted to play dirty, then so would I. I combed through old emails, messages, and photos, looking for any proof of his absence or his lies. Hours passed, and frustration grew as I came up empty-handed. Then, as I scrolled through my phone, I stumbled upon something strange. It was a photo of Lily's hospital bracelet from the day she was born, taken in the delivery room. The father's name wasn't listed. I frowned. Daniel had claimed in court that he was present at Lily's birth, but this bracelet proved otherwise. Why hadn't Julia brought this up during the trial? I forwarded the photo to Julia with a note. Does this help? Her response was almost immediate. Absolutely. Keep looking for more like this. The next few days were a whirlwind of research, phone calls, and restless nights. Every memory I revisited brought back the pain of the custody battle, but I pushed through it for Lily's sake. Slowly, pieces of a larger puzzle began to emerge. One afternoon, I received an unexpected call from a private investigator Julia had hired. His name was Mark, and his voice was gruff but reassuring. Ms. Harper, he said, I've been looking into Mr. Richards' background, and I found something you might want to see. Are you free to meet this evening? Of course, I replied, my heart racing. What did you find? It's better if I show you in person, he said cryptically. Later that evening, I met Mark at a small diner on the edge of town. He slid a manila folder across the table, his expression grim. What's in here could be the key to getting your daughter back, he said. I opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were documents, photos, and financial records that painted a very different picture of Daniel than the one he'd presented in court. He's been hiding a lot, Mark said. Bank accounts under false names, offshore transactions, and payments to some questionable individuals. He's not as clean as he wants everyone to believe. One photo in particular caught my eye. It was of Daniel shaking hands with a man outside a courthouse in another state. The man looked familiar, but I couldn't place him. Who's this? I asked, holding up the photo. That, Mark said, leaning back in his chair, is a lawyer who specializes in custody cases. He's known for helping people win custody by less than legal means. My blood ran cold. Are you saying Daniel paid this man to help him win? I can't prove that yet, Mark admitted. But if we dig deeper, I'm confident we'll find a connection. As I left the diner that night, I felt a new sense of determination. For the first time since the court ruling, I had hope. I wasn't just fighting for custody anymore. I was fighting to expose the truth. The following morning, I woke up feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Purpose. I wasn't going to let Daniel's lies define my life or Lily's. The evidence Mark had uncovered felt like a lifeline, and I clung to it with everything I had. My first call of the day was to Julia. I forwarded the documents and photos from the manila folder, explaining what Mark had found. She listened intently, her voice filled with cautious optimism. This could work, Claire, she said. If we can prove that Daniel used unethical or illegal methods to win custody, the court could overturn their decision. But we'll need more than this to make a strong case. Do you trust Mark enough to keep digging? I don't have much choice, I admitted. He seems thorough, and he's already found more than I ever could on my own. Good. Keep in touch with him, and let me know if anything new comes up. In the meantime, I'll start preparing a motion to present this to the court. As the days went by, Mark and I worked tirelessly to uncover the full extent of Daniel's deception. Each new piece of evidence felt like a step closer to getting Lily back, but it also painted a more disturbing picture of the man I'd once trusted. I learned that Daniel had been involved in a series of shady business deals, many of which bordered on illegal. He'd lied about his income, his connections, and even his relationship with Lily. But the most damning discovery came late one night when Mark called me, his voice urgent. "Claire, you're not going to believe this," he said. "I've been looking into Daniel's lawyer, the one from the photo I showed you. It turns out he's been disbarred in 2 states for unethical practices, including falsifying evidence in custody cases." My stomach turned. "Are you saying they could have fabricated evidence against me?" "It's possible," Mark replied. "I've already requested access to court records and documents from your case. If we can prove that anything was falsified or manipulated, it could blow his case wide open." The thought of someone tampering with my life, my reputation, and my relationship with Lily was infuriating. I wanted to march into the courtroom right then and demand justice, but I knew I had to be patient. While Mark worked on uncovering more evidence, I focused on building my case from the inside. I reached out to old friends, neighbors, and anyone who could vouch for my character and my relationship with Lily. I found letters from her teachers praising her progress in school, notes from her doctor about how well she was cared for, and even photos of our many happy moments together. One night, as I was organizing these documents, I came across something I'd almost forgotten about: Lily's drawings. She loved to draw, and her art was always filled with bright colors and happy scenes of us together. One drawing in particular stood out: a crayon picture of our little family, just her and me holding hands under a sunny sky. I stared at it for a long time, tears welling in my eyes. This was what I was fighting for, not just custody, but the life we'd built together. Daniel might have won the first battle, but he didn't know what I was capable of when it came to protecting my daughter. 2 weeks later, Julia called me with news that made my heart race. "Claire, we've got enough to file the motion. The evidence from Mark, combined with the testimony and documents you've gathered, is strong enough to warrant a review of the custody decision." "When will the hearing be?" I asked, gripping the phone tightly. "The judge has scheduled it for next week," Julia said. "It'll be our chance to present everything we've found. But be prepared. Daniel won't go down without a fight." I wasn't afraid of a fight anymore. I was ready. The day of the hearing arrived faster than I expected. I stood outside the courthouse, clutching a folder filled with evidence and testimony, my heart pounding in my chest. Julia stood beside me, her calm and confident demeanor reassuring me that we had a real chance. Inside the courtroom, Daniel was already seated with his lawyer, the same smug expression on his face that had haunted me since the last hearing. But this time, I wasn't the scared, defeated woman he'd faced before. I was determined, focused, and ready to expose the truth. As the hearing began, Julia wasted no time laying out our case. She presented the evidence Mark had uncovered, including the photos, financial records, and proof of Daniel's connection to the disbarred lawyer. She questioned witnesses who testified to my character and my relationship with Lily, painting a picture of a loving, dedicated mother who had been unfairly maligned. Daniel's lawyer tried to poke holes in our case, but it was clear he was scrambling. The evidence was overwhelming, and every argument he made seemed to crumble under the weight of the truth. Finally, Julia presented the most damning piece of evidence: a document from the original custody case that had been altered to make me look unfit. Mark had found the original version, and the difference was undeniable. The courtroom was silent as the judge examined the documents, his expression growing darker with each passing moment. "Mr. Richards," he said, his voice stern, "do you have an explanation for this?" Daniel stammered, his confidence evaporating. I wasn't aware of any falsification, Your Honor. My lawyer handled everything." The judge's glare could have melted steel. "Ignorance is not an excuse. This court takes matters of perjury and evidence tampering very seriously." For the first time, I saw fear in Daniel's eyes. The courtroom's tension was palpable, the air thick with anticipation as Daniel stumbled over his words, trying desperately to salvage what was left of his case. His lawyer, too, had gone pale, his usual cocky demeanor replaced with visible panic. Julia pressed on, her voice steady and firm as she addressed the judge. Your Honor, the evidence speaks for itself. My client has endured false accusations and a manipulative campaign to strip her of custody. Mr. Richards has not only lied about his involvement in his daughter's life, but has also used unethical and illegal means to influence this court's decision. The judge's gaze shifted from Julia to Daniel, his tone growing sharper. Mr. Richards, this court does not take lightly to being misled. Falsifying evidence undermines the integrity of our entire judicial system. This hearing will determine whether your custody was obtained through deceit, and if so, there will be severe consequences. I sat there clutching the edge of the table, my heart pounding in my ears. It felt like years of pain and hopelessness were finally being unraveled in this room. But I wasn't ready to celebrate just yet. There was still too much at stake. Daniel's lawyer attempted a weak defense, claiming that the evidence was circumstantial and that any errors in documentation were unintentional. But Julia was quick to counter, pointing out the glaring inconsistencies and the undeniable connection between Daniel and his disbarred lawyer. Unintentional, Julia scoffed. Then why did Mr. Richards meet with a lawyer known for tampering with evidence and manipulating court rulings? Why were these falsified documents submitted to the court under his name? The pattern is clear, Your Honor. This was a deliberate attempt to steal custody of Lily Harper. As Julia spoke, I glanced over at Daniel. His face was a mixture of anger and desperation, his confident facade crumbling under the weight of the truth. It was the first time I had ever seen him vulnerable, and though part of me felt vindicated, another part of me couldn't help but feel sadness. How had we come to this? How had the man I once loved turned into a person I barely recognized? The judge cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. Ms. Harper, I have a few questions for you, he said, his tone measured. Yes, Your Honor, I replied, my voice trembling slightly. You've provided a wealth of evidence regarding Mr. Richards' misconduct. But I need to hear from you. Why do you believe you are the better parent for Lily? What makes you capable of providing the stability and care she needs? I took a deep breath, my mind racing to find the right words. Your Honor, Lily is my world. I began, my voice steadying as I spoke from the heart. I've raised her on my own since the day she was born. I've been there for her first steps, her first words, her first day of school. Every decision I've made has been with her best interests in mind. I've worked tirelessly to provide for her, to give her a safe and loving home. But more than that, Your Honor, I know Lily. I know her favorite bedtime story, her favorite color, the way she likes her pancakes cut into little hearts. I know how to comfort her when she's scared and how to make her laugh when she's sad. She's not just my daughter. She's my life. And I will do everything in my power to protect her and ensure she grows up surrounded by love, not manipulation or deceit. The judge nodded, his expression softening ever so slightly. Thank you, Ms. Harper. That will be all for now. As the hearing continued, the tide began to shift decisively in my favor. Witness after witness testified to my character and dedication as a mother, while Daniel's past behavior and dishonest tactics were laid bare for all to see. When the judge finally adjourned the hearing to deliberate, I felt an overwhelming mix of emotions. Hope, fear, exhaustion. Julia placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. You did great, Claire, she said. Now we wait. The wait was excruciating. Every second felt like an eternity as we sat in the courtroom, the clock ticking louder with each passing moment. I clutched Lily's drawing in my hands, praying silently that the truth would prevail. Finally, the judge returned, his expression unreadable. He took his seat, adjusted his glasses, and cleared his throat. After reviewing the evidence and testimony presented in this hearing, he began, It is clear that the original custody ruling was based on false and misleading information. This court cannot, in good conscience, allow such a ruling to stand. I held my breath, my hands trembling as I waited for him to continue. Therefore, the judge said, his voice firm, custody of Lily Harper is hereby restored to her mother, Claire Harper. Furthermore, this court will be pursuing an investigation into Mr. Richards' actions and the role his legal representation played in this case. Appropriate legal consequences will follow. The room spun as his words sank in. I had won. Lily was coming home. Daniel shot to his feet, his face red with anger. This isn't fair, he shouted. You can't take her away from me. The judge's gavel struck the bench. Order in the court. Mr. Richards, you have been warned. Any further outbursts will result in your removal from this courtroom. As Daniel was escorted out by security, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief wash over me. Tears streamed down my face as Julia hugged me tightly. You did it, Claire, she whispered. You never gave up. The ride home was surreal. For the first time in months, the weight that had pressed down on my chest was gone. As the car pulled into my driveway, I glanced at the empty booster seat in the back, a pang of sadness mixing with my joy. But this time it wasn't permanent. Lily would be home soon. The next day, I stood outside the courthouse, holding my breath as the social worker walked toward me, Lily's tiny hand in hers. My heart raced as I saw her. My baby, my beautiful Lily, her golden curls bouncing in the sunlight, her eyes lighting up when she spotted me. Mommy, she shouted, letting go of the social worker's hand and running toward me. I dropped to my knees, catching her in my arms, tears streaming down my face. Oh, my sweet girl, I whispered, holding her tight. I missed you so much. I missed you too, Mommy, she said, her little arms wrapping around my neck. I knew you'd come for me. I pulled back to look at her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Always, Lily. I will always fight for you. The social worker gave me a kind smile. She's all yours, Miss Harper. You've earned this. I nodded, my voice too choked with emotion to respond. I took Lily's hand, guiding her toward the car, where her favorite toys and snacks waited. As we drove home, Lily chattered excitedly about her favorite stories, her drawings, and all the things she wanted to do now that she was back. Her laughter filled the car, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to laugh too. That night, as I tucked her into bed, she handed me one of her crayons and a piece of paper. Draw with me, Mommy, she said, her eyes sparkling. Together, we drew a picture of us standing hand in hand under a bright, sunny sky. It was simple, but it captured everything I had fought for. Our love, our bond, our family. As I kissed her goodnight and turned out the light, I stood in the doorway, watching her sleep peacefully. I had faced the darkest moments of my life, but I had come out stronger, braver, and more determined than ever. The court might have taken my baby, but the truth, and my unwavering love, brought her back to me. And as I lay in bed that night, holding Lily's drawing close to my heart, I knew one thing for certain. We were finally home. The end.